Welcome once again to the Tin Dog Podcast. As you could hear from that distinct opening music, Bernard Cribbins' influence has reached us even here in podcast land. For those of you who don't know, Bernard now plays Donna Noble's granddad, but in the 1970s he was also the voice, the narrator of The Wombles, an animated series about recycling animals that live on Wimbledon Common. At Christmas I did notice that the new Doctor Who theme tune bore more than a passing resemblance to the Wombles music. I tried mixing them together, and the result you've just heard. Not as well mixed as I would have liked, but enough nonsense. On with this double episode of the Tin Dog Podcast. And it's Sontartastic. But before I begin my review of the Sontaran Stratagem and the Poison Sky, I just need to thank Louise Dawson from the USA for donating to help keep the Tin Dog Podcast running. Thanks, Louise. I have to say at this point that I think Season 4 has been truly fantastic so far. The weakest episode was definitely Episode 1, and even then, it was hardly a bad example. But this two-parter, marking the return of the Sontarans, has just pressed all of the classic Doctor Who buttons. Everything that Helen Raynor may or may not have got wrong last year with her Dalek story, she's got right this time. And best of all, the design of the new Sontarans was just superb. Costume-wise, the Jadoon from last season might perhaps have more of the blackness about them, and I'm not completely sold on the colour, but the shape, the cut, and specifically the prosthetics, excellently well done. Of course, prosthetics can only get you so far, and it's Christopher Ryan's portrayal of General Staal that really brings the Sontarans back.
I will look into my enemy's eyes.
And your name?
General Staal, of the 10th Sontaran Fleet. Staal the Undefeated.
Oh, that's not a very good nickname. What if you do get defeated? Staal, they're not quite so undefeated anymore, but never mind.
To what they were when they first appeared, way back in Sarah Jane's first story. The history of the Sontaran race has been compiled as a text document on my website, so if you want to know more about their other appearances, please feel free to visit that and have a quick read. But today we're talking about the Sontaran Stratagem first. Although the Sontarans are classic Doctor Who villains, they do differ from the other two big villains, the Cybermen and the Daleks, in two important ways. The Cybermen have had their emotions removed completely. The Daleks have had many of their emotions removed, and to many respects both are fairly robotic races, although yes, I know, they're not robots, they're cyborgs. The Sontarans are very different. These are creatures of emotion. Admittedly, they're driven by war, and apparently have what's known in the trade as small man syndrome, a bit of a Napoleon complex, apparently hailing from a high-gravity world which we've never seen, and constantly at war with a race of creatures called the Rutans, who are shape-changing blobs of jelly who can possess people and other creatures. The Sontarans are a clone race. One basic, original Sontaran, copied and reproduced in their millions in order to go out into the universe and fight. It's that simple, that's their motivation, that's their characterization. From some time ago we knew the Sontarans were coming back, so naming the episode the Sontaran Stratagem wasn't really going to be that much of a surprise, in the way that many of the classic series were called things of such and such of the Daleks, and you sat through the entire first episode going, there'll be a Dalek along in a minute, perhaps. Oh look, there it is, oh it's the end of the episode. We weren't subjected to that at all. We knew it was the Sontaran Stratagem, the Sontarans turned up, and we hit the ground running. In many respects, this story owes a lot to John Pertwee's Doctor, mainly in the character of UNIT. UNIT used to stand for the United Nations Intelligence Task Force, until the real United Nations went, you know, you didn't really clear it with us originally whenever it was in the past. You really should change the name in this modern climate. Such things are discussed on the commentaries, which are downloadable from the BBC's Doctor Who website, and it is nice to see those back up and running. Thanks, BBC. At the episode opening, the Doctor is getting Donna to pilot the TARDIS, something I don't think we've seen him do for a very long time, and almost never with a human companion. Nyssa and Adric could drive the TARDIS in the classic series, but that was about all. Captain Jack may have shown a flair for it, but as he's from the whatever, I'm not completely sure he counts. A line that many people may have missed was this.
Left hand down, left hand down! Getting a bit too close to the 1980s.
What am I going to do? Put a dent in her?
Well, someone did.
That could have been a throwaway line, or it could be a sign of something more sinister coming in the future. Of course, there is a third option, where it was actually a sideswipe at the current BBC TV series Ashes to Ashes, where someone may or may not be in the 80s. As I said earlier, the Sontarans are really portrayed well. When we first see the Sontarans, we don't actually see them close up, but we do hear them. We hear the General doing this.
Observe their troops. Thin fabrics, exposed skin, feeble weapons. These are toy soldiers, the playthings of children.
Which is a marvellous way of looking at us. This is a general observing the enemy, an enemy he knows he is better than. Simple characterization is only simple when it's done well, and here we have a great example. UNIT is run by a new commander. Now this commander is played by an actor who looked immediately familiar, but I just couldn't quite place him, and it wasn't until I received a text message from a friend of mine from university that I managed to place where I'd seen him before. He used to appear in a comedy series with the comedian Harry Enfield as part of a double act called The Double Take Brothers. They would appear, look at something, and then act surprised when something happened very similar. Ideal for a military commander taking on a load of clones. Perhaps he had to just be there. Getting back to UNIT for a moment, there is of course something historically wrong with when exactly the original 3rd and 4th Doctor UNIT stories took place. The original intent was for them to take place just a couple of years forward of when they were being shown. For example, Sarah Jane in her first story says that she's from 1980, which is fine until you discover in a much later story in the 80s, put out when someone hadn't really checked the facts, that the Brigadier was meant to retire from UNIT in 1977. And so when the Doctor says,
What, you used to work for them?
Yeah, a long time ago, back in the 70s. It wasn't the 80s, but it was all a bit more homespun back then.
That's more of a nod to the hardcore fans who have yet to stop debating this sort of thing. Again, we've got some great characterization from Donna, super temp. Evidence that the writing team is using Donna's strengths as part of a character development rather than just using her as some sort of cardboard cutout character. The sort of thing you just can't get away with these days. Another thing that made me laugh was when Donna's mother says, "You really should cut those coupons out, this mortgage won't pay for itself," implying that she has a new mortgage, which is of course at the moment evidence that the TV series really is pure science fiction, because the idea of anyone being able to get a mortgage in England at this particular time is quite ludicrous. We have of course several references to other things, more references to the Medusa Cascade, and a rather nice reference to Dalek from Season 1 or the 2005 season, depending on which way your fan bread is buttered, where the Doctor quotes Van Statten's joke, "How did the intruder get in? He got in through the window." Yes, it wasn't funny then either. Of course, that was the story where we first heard a little bit more information about the Time War. The Time War again referenced here, when Staal says,
There is an enemy of the Sontarans known as the Doctor. A face changer.
Do you mean he's an alien too?
Legend says he led the battle in the last great Time War. The finest war in history, and we weren't allowed to be part of it. Oh, but this is excellent. The last of the Time Lords will die at the hands of the Sontaran Empire in the ruins of his precious Earth!
As has been proven before, the Sontarans do have rudimentary time technology, so the idea of them not being allowed by someone or something not to partake in the Time War is interesting, but probably something we won't ever get really into. After all, the chances of us ever seeing the Time War are minimal. I'd like to think that the Sontarans were used by one side or the other in the Time War without them knowing, but that's just fan-based nonsense. Before I discuss episode 2, talking about the Jadoon earlier reminded me of something I'd seen on YouTube, which of course is now on the Who Mix site. Someone has taken the Jadoon song, remixed it, and it's here. I just thought I'd like you to hear it if you've not heard it before. If you enjoyed, please feel free to go to the Who Mix site and leave a comment there. Here you go.
Sentence execution.
I must admit that did make me laugh. So, let's continue with the discussion of Part 2, The Poison Sky. The Sontarans haven't invaded. They obviously have some sort of plan. You had a week to think about it. Some of the things I was coming up with in my own head were that the Sontarans just wanted to wipe out life on Earth in order to stop the Rutans from taking over and using us as hosts. Of course, eventually we find out the plot is very similar to the beginning of this season, where we're going to use the Earth as a seed world. Again, one of their clone worlds may have been lost. A little bit too similar to episode 1, perhaps. I just don't know yet. It's the sort of thing we really have to hang on until the end of the season to find out. The rugby-style chant of the Sontarans was something brand new to me, and admittedly it worked the first time. Felt a little bit comical for my liking. As did the gratuitous use of the music, the carry-on screaming dun-dun-da music. It was a bit Dick Dastardly for my liking. As was the Simpsons reference, where the geek announces that he has organised a mating programme for Earth version 2. But in saying that, episode 2 is still very strong. It doesn't drop the ball, like some episode 2 do. Of course I had some questions, things like, let's protect the operative. She's a clone. Why bother? The fact that she has to keep pressing no on the let's not launch the weapons thing could be the entire reason, but to be honest I'm not completely sure. I would like to think that the clone Martha survived in some small way. I know we saw her slump to the ground, assumingly dead, but you just don't know. So if someone ends up in Torchwood who looks like Martha, there's no guarantee that she's the real thing. Of course, discussing Torchwood at this point is kind of pointless, except if you're going to ask, where were they during all of this? Oh look, a tumbleweed. Let's not ask that question ever again, shall we? As the missiles were being prepared, A map is shown on the wall with all of the atomic-ready powers. Russia is completely missing from the list. But more oddly, North Korea, who go around saying officially that they don't have any weapons of that sort, are on the list. Does that imply that this is a slightly different universe than ours? Or does it mean that there's something else lined up for Russia? There was talk of them having their own version of UNIT, the Vodjanoi, but that's more from a Virgin Missing Adventure. And as we all know, things discussed in novels are only useful when they're lifted and used elsewhere. And yes, some of the classic Doctor Who fans and classic sci-fi fans amongst you have seen the Vodjanoi elsewhere. I won't ask you to email in and tell me where it's from, but you know Celia Imrie was in it, crashing on. I was slightly annoyed when the Sontaran shouted,
"This isn't war, this is sport!"
which was just a little bit close to when the Daleks used to shout, "This isn't war, this is pest control." It was great to see the Valiant turn up. And a laugh-out-loud moment in this episode came when the Doctor said,
Are you my mummy?
But for most people listening, my favourite moment by far was just a little nod to Brigadier Alistair Gordon Lethbridge-Stewart, who's still a Brigadier, but he's now Sir Alistair. The guy got a knighthood, the guy hasn't been killed off, the guy could return. This made a lot of people very happy.
Times like this I could do with a Brigadier. No offence.
None taken. Alistair's a fine man, if not the best. Unfortunately, he's stranded in Peru.
I'll leave you now, just in time for next week's show. The Doctor's Daughter. I'm sure a lot of people are going to have a lot of things to say on this. Whether it's good, bad, or uses the word lung barrow, we'll get back to you soon. Be seeing you.
Join us in the war against the Hat.
I'm Dr. Martha Jones. Who the hell are you?
She's my daughter.
Hello, Dad.
Doctor Who, Saturday at 6:45 on BBC One. And if you missed the last episode, it's available now on BBC iPlayer.
You have been listening to the Tin Dog Podcast. Doctor Who and its associated shows are all trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. Contact us at tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk.